Alright guys, so here are characteristics of functions. For time's sake, I'm going to be doing two little videos, hopefully not too long each. And this one is going to talk about functions that are parabolas or absolute value graphs. And then in the next one, I'll talk about the characteristics of the ones that are just the lines, okay? So hopefully that whichever one is confusing you can just view the video on that, okay? So the first thing that we're gonna do is these graphs I had here. I honestly don't remember if you guys have them or not, but it doesn't matter. You just need to do a little sketch and then try to figure out the characteristics, and I'll zoom in as I'm talking a little bit more about those, okay? So A, x-intercepts. Also the letters might not match what your homework says, but it's okay. That's why I'm writing the whole word.
Can I be a homework?
So when we're talking about the x-intercepts, we're talking about the values that are touching the x-axis, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and take a green marker and I'm going to highlight my x-axis. Remember, there's always arrows at the end because this goes on to infinity, okay? And so where are we touching? We are touching here, and we can't see where it's touching, right? But if we were to extend it, right, and we were able to extend, it would be touching here, which is at about the 5. Okay, so when we're talking about the x-intercepts, what I would write here is this first one, which is -3, 0. And I would do 5, 0. Now, why am I doing these zeros in black? Okay, because this in black, and I went over this right here, is always going to be the same. When we're talking about our x-intercepts, our y is going to be 0, and the only numbers that we're going to have change are this first number and this first number. Okay, so those are my x-intercepts. Now when we have, this is an absolute value graph, but if this had been a parabola, which means it has a little u, it would have still been the same thing. You guys would highlight and see how many intercepts it has. So down here, I do have a parabola graph, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing. Here is, I'm looking for my x-intercepts, so I'm gonna highlight my x-axis, and where do I touch? Right here and right here. Now this graph actually is not right on the numbers, okay? And I'm sorry, this is just the graph that I had at hand. So it's just what I'm using, okay? But we can pretend that it is touching, okay? And if we pretend that this was widened a little bit more, where would it have been touching? 2, so let me go ahead and do this. And I'm gonna do my zeros because I know that those are gonna be there. Okay, where if we stretch this out a little bit more, where would it have been touching? 2. And what about here? If we stretch it out a little bit this way, it would have been touching the 4. Okay. All right. Now the next thing or characteristic that you guys were asked to identify in these is the y-intercepts. Okay, and for this I'm going to use a blue marker. Okay, and I have, you guys are gonna hear things in the background, and I apologize, right, like always. And I have a lovely assistant today.
Ella.
Okay, my lovely assistant Betty. All right.
Sister's watching on the tablet.
Okay, so we are going to be looking for my y-intercepts. That's B. Y-intercept, and intercept because it's only going to be 1, okay? Okay, and I do apologize because that is like a baby blue, but it's okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing that I did earlier, and I'm gonna highlight. This is my y-intercept that I'm looking for, so I'm going to highlight my y-axis. And where was I touching? I was touching right here. And where is that? If I zoom in, it is -3. So now this is opposite of the y-intercept. Okay, here we're gonna have our frame, but our 0 is gonna be on the x. And the number that we're looking at, since it is on the y-axis, that is in our y spot. So -3. Okay. All right, and let's go to our graph on the bottom. If we do the exact same thing, we're gonna go ahead and highlight our y-axis. And this is kind of like one of the problems that we had in class. You guys said, oh, it doesn't touch. But we said, remember, this is just a small window, right? You have to realize that there's more to this graph. But since, you know, paper is very limited in terms of it has edges, right? We can't do the whole thing. Is this eventually going to touch, right? If I were to sketch this line out here and keep going, is it going to touch? Yes. Do we know where it is as of right now? No. So we're just going to possibly write for today, not visible, but take into consideration that we are going to know how to solve for this, okay? But that's going to be possibly tomorrow. All right, the next characteristic of these graphs is our axis of symmetry. And for this, we had been using yellow, okay? Obviously not gonna write in yellow because then that wouldn't make sense. But I'm gonna do C, axis of symmetry. And we have it abbreviated as AOS, just in case you guys didn't remember, okay? All right, so what is the axis of symmetry? It is where if I could draw a line that's gonna cut these graphs right down the middle and they would be identical on both sides, where would that be? Okay, so if you are able to identify the vertex, then you're solid, you're good, right? This is the vertex, this is the vertex. I just need to draw a line. If you don't know how to identify the vertex and say that's the point where the line changes, then you can always just say, okay, where, okay, let me see. I'm actually gonna use a hanger that I have here. Where could I draw a line that it's gonna cut them in half? And you're like, oh, right here. If I were to draw a line right here, I'm able actually to see that it's identical on both sides, okay? All right, so I'm gonna draw my line here. What is my axis of symmetry? Where am I touching my x-axis? Because if you guys clearly remember, Ms. Ramos told you guys that the axis of symmetry is always x equals, and then what does x equal at that point? -1. I mean, positive 1, sorry, positive 1. What about here? If I draw my line, what is the value of my x at that point? 3. Okay. All right. Next characteristic is domain and range. Now, one thing that you guys should memorize, right, is that the domain, so I'm just gonna write D domain, and I'm going to write range. The domain is always going to be all real numbers.
Mommy?
Yes. Mama, I'm doing work. Mommy, go over there. Go with Daddy. Okay, so domain is all real numbers. Okay, whether we have an absolute value graph or we have a parabola. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and write all real numbers, or we can go ahead and write it how Miss Ramos said, ARN. Okay, it means the same thing, all real numbers. Okay, the range is what's going to be a little different. Now, for these parabolas or absolute value graphs, always and forever, you're going to start with y, but then you're going to have an inequality, greater than or less than, right? We actually had a student, and I don't know if Miss Ramos heard when the student was telling me this, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. And Michelle, thank you for it. If you have what we call the smiley face, right? Or we have a sad face. Okay, she said if you have a smiley face graph, right? Then it wants to talk to the absolute value sign. So it's going to do this, right? It's trying to chat. If you are having a bad day, if you have a sad face, then the Y does not want to talk, right? It's like an ignore its friend. So here we would have Y is greater than or equal to. Here we would have Y is less than or equal to. That's her little take on it. She said, I remember it by if you're happy, you want to talk to your friend. If you're not happy, you don't want to talk to your friend, okay? So maybe that can help you. So here we are happy. So we want to talk to our friend. And I'm going to go ahead and do my absolute value symbol facing. Y is going to be greater than or equal to, and what is that value? Right here. And I'm talking about my Y. So if I go over, it's a -4. My Y is going to be -4 or greater. If I go down here, this is a sad face, right? I don't want to talk to my friend. Less than or equal to. And what is the Y value here? 2.
No seafood?
Okay.
No seafood.
I hope that helps. That's domain and range for these. And I believe we have one more characteristics, or actually 2. The next one is increasing and decreasing. This is the one where I actually told a couple of you guys to ignore the words increasing and decreasing for just a little bit and to go ahead and write the intervals to start off. And then you can determine what's going on after. Okay, so that's gonna go ahead and write our intervals here. And I'm gonna use a pencil. Okay, so I had already put my negative infinities and my positive infinities, and I purposefully am using this same graph so that we can identify. We have negative infinity to my axis of symmetry, which is 1. So not on here, not yet. I'm just gonna put it on here somewhere. So I'll just do it right here on my margin. I'm gonna do negative infinity to 1. That's my first interval. And then my second interval, or second part of the graph, right? We're gonna have 1 to positive infinity. Now I need to determine where I need to put these. Are these increasing? Are these decreasing? What is going on? So because I don't have a lot of room, I'm just gonna write increasing and decreasing, okay? So from -1 to 1, what's happening on my graph? Right? We read from left to right. If we have a little, our little make-believe friend Panchito here, and he's coming this way, what is he doing? He is decreasing. So this one is decreasing. And from here, from the 1 to the positive infinity, he is increasing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy on increasing 1 to infinity. And my other interval decreasing would be from negative infinity to 1. Okay, let's try it on the bottom. Before we even determine what's increasing or decreasing, I'm going to go ahead and do my first interval is negative infinity to 3. Negative infinity to 3. And then 3 to positive infinity. Remember, we're talking about patterns, noticing patterns. We want to work smarter, not harder, right? Remember, look, you see this? You see this? You notice that these numbers are the same? Okay? So if for whatever reason and you're decreasing, increasing, your numbers are not matching, then some red light should go off, right? In your mind. Be like, no, 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 something's going on. Okay, so now, let's see. From negative infinity to 3. What's going on? What's going on? I am increasing. So that is going to be my increasing interval. And then from 3 to negative infinity, or I'm sorry, from 3 to positive infinity, I'm decreasing. So I'm going to go ahead and write it over here now. Increasing, decreasing. And I said my increasing was negative infinity to 3. And decreasing is from 3 to positive infinity. And the last one, end behavior. So, students think that end behavior is difficult, but remember today we talked about it and we said maybe we don't understand the actual mathematics behind it, but we just need to understand what we need to do and why it is, okay? So here we have end behavior, and I can write the skeleton because that's just how it is, right? We have as x approaches negative infinity, don't drop him.
No, Bochito.
F of x, or y, is approaching what? As x approaches positive infinity, f of x, or y, is approaching what? Okay, so this is what we did.
Oh, that was a lot.
We have, as my x is getting smaller, right, going to negative infinity, where do I need to go to meet my y? Up. So that is positive infinity. As my x is going to positive infinity, where do I need to go to see my or meet my graph? Up, positive infinity. Remember we said if it is an absolute value or if it is a parabola, they're both going to be the same at the end. Smiley face, right, is positive. Sad face is going to be what? Negative. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and write it. We'll go ahead and we'll go through the process. F as x approaches negative infinity, f of x approaches what? As x approaches infinity, f of x approaches what? Okay, as my x goes to negative infinity, where do I need to go to meet my graph? Down here, negative infinity. As x approaches positive infinity, where do I need to go to meet my graph? Down here, negative infinity. You guys see? Sad face, 2 negatives. Happy face, 2 positives. Okay, so if you guys have questions on the absolute value and on the parabolas, how to identify the characteristics, I hope this helped.